Good everyone, bonjour tout le monde, this is Roger and welcome to our first episode of BIA Daily Dodgers of Canada 2021 in Sicily. During the night of 9 July 1943, the Canadiens are a few kilometers off the coast of Sicily and they're getting ready to embark into the LCIs and LCTs that will take them to the beach. They are part of the largest combined operation that have ever been mounted to date. Over 3,000 ships, 4,000 aircrafts, 150,000 troops. There will be 26,000 Canadians landing on the beach near Pechino in Sicily. They've been integrated to the 8th British Army. The beach that they will be landing on has been divided in two zones. 2 brigades will land on Sugar Beach and 1 brigade will land on Roger Beach. So let's go and relive this extraordinary part of our Canadian history. Because of the noises of battle and the rough seas, a number of LCIs got lost on their way to the beach. Hastings and Prince Edward Regiment that was supposed to land on Roger Beach, 7th Platoon was led by Farley Mowat, and their LCI stopped. The ramp dropped. Farley Mowat is at the edge of that ramp, and he turns, looked at his platoon and tells them, "Follow me," but he's about to get the surprise of his life. As Lieutenant Mowat left his landing craft, big surprise was that he landed with water above his head. But instead of panicking, he kept walking on the bottom of the sea until his head popped out. And then the platoon ward who watched him go down, basically when he saw the head come out, waved to the rest of the platoon and said, "Sick, follow the leader." So everybody went down in the water until they came out and approached the beach. All that while there was like bullet tracers going over their head and everywhere from a machine gun point that was about 400 meters on the rise. So as soon as they hit the sand, they located where the fire was coming from, and from there they organized like 7th Platoon and other elements of A Company that landed with them, organized themselves to go do an assault on this house. When they regrouped and started their advance, they noticed that CSM Nudley was missing. So they turned around and noticed that CSM Nudley was still laying on the beach and received a bullet through the neck and basically became the first casualty of the Hastings and Prince Edward Regiment during Operation Husky. The sad thing about that is that CSM Nudley didn't need to be there. He volunteered, he was a 20-year veteran who volunteered to be with his troops to take part of this first action of the war for his regiment. So we remember CSM Nudley in this brave action. So as you can see over there on the rise, this is the house where the machine gun, that 7th Platoon was taking the machine gun fire from. And this is where they organized themselves, the platoon with the rest of A Company, to go and attack this machine gun position. So the story says that by the time 7th Platoon was close to the house, ready to do their assault, fixed bayonet, Lieutenant Mowat is storming the house. By the time they get there were elements of British commandos who came from the rear, neutralized those machine gun positions,
and took care of it. Absolutely, the commando guys said that it was a lovely charge. However, it was a good thing that the commandos did that, because there was 4 machine guns inside, and when they did their frontal assault on the house, if they would have been operational, there's a big chance that Farley Moab's platoon would have been wiped out. So that's a good thing.
All right, so the leading elements that were to land on Sugar Beach, 2 Brigade, Seafort Highlanders included, they were like with their 2 assault companies, were virtually unopposed and were able to really declare the beach secure by around 400 hours. However, that was not the case for Roger Beach, and so like 1 Brigade battalions who were to land, like 2 companies of Royal Canadian Regiment and the Hastings and Prince Edward Regiment, they were running into some challenges that were not foreseen at first. What was discovered is that a few hundred meters off the coast of Roger Beach, there were some sandbars that have been identified, and those sandbars would prevent the landing craft to go land directly on the beach. So the decision was made to bring in some dock Ws, and that would add to the complexity of the landing. So that when the troops left the motorships with their landing craft, they reached the sandbars, and then they had to disembark their landing craft, load into the dock Ws, and make the rest of the way all the way to the beach. This delayed the assault tremendously, at least for a couple hours, or 2.5 hours more. So by the time the first element, Alpha Company and Bravo Company of Royal Canadian Regiment, reached the beach, we were on the early morning hours, and it was like almost close to 6 o'clock, 05:46 I believe. So they were delayed in their landing, but things got moving and they took control pretty quick. So what happened after the Royal Canadian Regiment consolidated on Roger Beach? Alpha Company led by Captain Liddell and Bravo Company led by Captain Strom Galloway both had to go secure their company objectives. So A Company took off to secure Mocini, and Bravo Company went to their objective, which is a small gun battery. That small gun battery was engaged by HMS Roberts, which was like a battleship there off the shore that was bombarding this coastal battery. And by the time B Company reached the battery, they had to stop their advance because it was too dangerous to proceed. Once the shells have stopped falling, Sergeant Hugard and his section went to investigate what it looked like, and they found in basically an anti-aerial dugout 23 Italians that they took as prisoners of war. Once those 2 objectives, Mocini and the gun batteries, were secured, now was the time for the Royal Canadian Regiment to continue their advance inland and to go to their main objective, which was the Pekino airfield.
The war loads of over 2,000 ships are put safely ashore within a few miles of the enemy's airfield. The liberation of Europe has begun.
The wall that you see there behind me, it was told to me by the local people in Pekino that this is what is left of the old airfield that was seized on the 10th of July 1943 by the Royal Canadian Regiment. All right, so let's go have a look at what that airstrip looks like today. The field that you see behind me there, the farmer's field, was the actual airstrip that the Royal Canadians were looking for in 1943. Charlie Company were the first company to be advancing toward the airstrip, and once they reached it, they went firm, and Alpha Company went through them to actually do the sweep through the airfield. As they were advancing, they were subject to a few mortar rounds, and they had to investigate where those rounds came from, and they found the actual defensive position and strong points where the fire was coming from. And the closer they approached, machine gun fire started to erupt. So A Company went firm. While this was happening, that Charlie Company was like behind them, Delta Company of the Hasty Peas were reached the position and linked up with Charlie Company. At that point, A Company is being told to hold firm, and Charlie Company, Royal Canadians, now will do a flanking sweep to try to overtake these strong points. As they were actually approaching, the firefight actually intensified and became very, very serious, to the point that some half a dozen of privates actually took the courageous initiative to storm 3 machine gun positions. They went through and then cut through barbed wires, out through obstacles, and they went on charging, Tommy guns flaring and throwing grenades until they overtook the 3 machine gun positions. During this action, Private Heffert of St. Thomas, Ontario, was mortally wounded and became the first casualty of the Royal Canadian Regiment. Private Grigas, as a result of this action, Private Grigas was awarded the Distinguished Service Medal, and Private Garner the Military Medal.
All right, so here we are with the owner of this farm here, Mr. Paolo Campisi, who basically on his farm has another piece of the wall that we thought didn't exist anymore. And he's holding in his hands some rounds that were found through the fields around here. We believe it could have been the type of round that was used by Italian aircrafts. So Paolo, so when was this wall constructed in the airport?
This stone wall was built in the 1920s. There was a military airport here during the war that was built by the government of the time. Even today, we still call it the wall.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you very much, Paolo, to have us and to help us discover this important piece of your history, and also the fact that there were Canadians here in 1943 that came here to hopefully make a better world for everybody. Grazie.
Grazie a te.
One thing that is very important to mention, and that there was other elements of the Canadian Armed Forces who participated in Operation Husky. Unfortunately, they were not attached to the Canadian contingent. The Royal Canadian Navy contributed 400 sailors. The 55th and 61st Flotilla of LCA and the 80th and 81st Flotilla of LCMs were attached to the British forces who landed east of Pekino. There's also the 417 Spitfire Squadron that was based out of Malta, who were busy weeks before the landing, either bombing or strafing the coast. And as well, they escorted the day of the landing, the beach landing, they escorted the flotillas on their way to the beach.
The advance was pushed. 3 days of dust, 8 hours of sleep.
This is late in the night of 10 July 1943. The Seaforth Highlanders, which are part of 2 Brigade, have been advancing inland over 10 kilometers all day through intense heat, dust, unfamiliar terrain, and never certain of what will happen with the enemy. And they didn't have a chance to stop, have a break, or even eat anything yet, since they loaded the ship the night before. So the troops are tired, sunburned, very thirsty because they didn't have any water resupply yet. And it will be the first time that they stop to have a chance to break their 24-hour ration until next morning, where they will continue the advance toward Ispica.
Okay, so right now we just find a a good place where we have a good view of the town of Ispica, and we're gonna go find a spot with John where we can set up and record the story of the Battle of Ispica. So, on 11 July, when the 1st Canadian Infantry Division and the 1st Canadian Armored Brigade were pursuing their advance inland, the next objective was the town of Ispica. Actually, what happened is that 2 brigade was coming on the axis of the road. This road here, the main axis toward Ispica. The naval guns had locked on the town that's behind me. Ispica was considered to be a fortified defensive position. It's the town is sitting high on top of a cliff that's about 150-foot rocky cliff. It's terraced-like, it's like these terraces, and we knew it's going to be a tough nut to crack. So what Simmons did, he had the naval guns drop a few bombs on it to make sure like we soften the target. However, when the commanding officer of the Loyal Edmonton Regiment had the order to advance into the town, he asked for additional rounds to be dropped at the town before he committed his men into the town. After being hit a few times with naval gun bombing, the town ended up not being so hard to crack, and they gave up the fighting pretty quick. So Ispica was taken without large bloodshed. Alright everybody, so right now we're on our way from Ispica, on our way to Modica. We're getting close to it, and we stopped so we can bring to you just a little add-up story about Captain George Duff Mitchell, who was the forward observation officer of the PPCLI, like Princess Patricia Canadian Light Infantry. On his way to Modica, him and his Brent carrier crew were well in advance of the infantry, and they ended up at a road junction that was covered by an anti-tank gun position, manned by about 20 Italian soldiers. So Captain Mitchell very calmly dismounted the Brent gun carrier, walked towards the anti-tank gun position, and convinced the Italian that it was better not to pick a fight. And amazingly, the Italian soldiers complied and missed because of this action without being any shot fired, and this courageous, I would say sometimes almost foolish action, but very courageous. Captain Mitchell earned himself the first military cross of the Italian campaign. A little historical point about those little stone walls. All along those hills here and valleys, the farmers have erected those stone walls everywhere. So imagine being an infantry. Now you're following the axis of advance, and you have to go through every field and go through these walls. We know that these can serve 2 purposes. It's good to hide behind if you're being engaged, but also the enemy might use it to their advantage. They know that the infantry will probably try to cross where there's an opening in the walls, and of course this will be covered by a machine gun. So I just wanted to bring that up to you. So like it's like a 2-edged sword, I would say. On the early, now it's the early morning hours of 12 July, and it's pitch dark still. We're before the sun comes up. The Royal Canadians have resumed their advance. They got up after a couple hours rest, and they resumed their advance toward Modica. However, in the haste of their departure, a section of soldiers was slept in and was somewhat forgotten. There was about 13 of them, and the leader was Mr. Lieutenant Sherry Atkinson. And Mr. Atkinson now wakes up and realizes everybody's gone, and he doesn't know where his regiment is. And he decides, man, I gotta find my regiment. So he goes on this journey with his men, and on the way they get to a crossroad where they find
they take a hit from anti-tank gun position. So they hit the ditch. And when they hit the ditch, while they're in the ditch, they see a motorcycle coming their way. And as the motorcycle approaches, they realize it's the brigade commander, Chris Vokes, on the motorcycle, so who's lost. And he's heading right for that crossroad. So the man like wave at, they get out of the ditch, wave at him to get out of the way. And Brigadier Vokes literally leaves his motorcycle, hits the ditch. What happens next is that now Sheriff Atkinson organizes his men, and they do a flanking assault on this gun position and neutralize it. Now somebody has to warn of what's going on, and they have a motorcycle. As they are consolidating and finishing their clearing the gun position, they see a man dressed in white. He looks like a very important man with medals and a sash, red sash, running at them, and they're wondering who he is. And as he gets closer, they realize it's the mayor of the town of Modica. So he doesn't want his village to be destroyed, and he wants to basically allow the Allies to do a transfer of custody of his authority. So Atkinson grabs the motorcycle with one of Lance Corporal Mitchell and starts making his way to Modica with the mayor running by his side as they're going down toward the city. So now Lieutenant Atkinson and Mitchell on their way to Modica with the mayor, so he can accept the transfer of custody of the town. But they're about to have a big surprise when they arrive in the piazza. Stick with me because you see the story gets very interesting.
Now, so imagine this. We have Lieutenant Atkinson with Lance Corporal Mitchell arriving on the motorcycle accompanied by the mayor of Modica. And what they found here as they roll into town is there's a whole garrison of about 500 Italian soldiers and carabineries who are willing to let the Allies enter the town to avoid unnecessary destruction. Now, we can picture themselves like first of all, Modica is not a very strategic location. But inside this town, there's a lot of cultural and historical treasures that they want to protect. Plus, we want to avoid unnecessary loss of lives. So I think it was the logical and rational thing to do for them to let the Allies or Canadians enter the town to avoid these unnecessary loss. The commander of the garrison of Modica was the General David. And General David wanted to transfer the custody of his garrison only to an officer of equal rank. So Lieutenant Atkinson left the very nervous Lance Corporal Mitchell in the company of the garrison of Modica and went to inform General Simmons.
Italians and Sicilians manned the coast, but all they wanted to do was go home. After only 2 days, the coastal defenders surrendered to the Canadian commander, General Guy Simmons.
On July 13, General Montgomery orders the Canadians to stop their advance, to allow the supply chain to catch up. In in 36 hours, the Canadians have advanced inland over 80 kilometers, and they need a well-deserved rest because most of them have suffered from heat stroke, sunburn, extreme thirst and fatigue, and are starting to feel the extreme heat of the climate in Sicily. Ross Monroe, a reporter from Canada, was the first Allied reporter to mention the invasion of Sicily, Operation Husky. To the annoyance of Eisenhower, not only was he the first reporter to mention the invasion of Sicily, but in his kind of report he forgot to mention that the British and Americans were also involved, leaving the population to believe that our men, Canadian soldiers, were by themselves taking on Italy.
The storm that might have stopped them had reassured the enemy. Relaxing, he was caught off guard. The 1st Division walked into Europe. At home, the ones who knew waited anxiously for the news.
The Prime Minister, the Right Honourable W.L. Mackenzie King, has an important message for the people of Canada.
Early on this morning of July the 10th, Allied forces, under the command of General Eisenhower, began landing operations in Sicily. All Canada will be justifiably proud to know that units of the Canadian Army are a part of the Allied force engaged in this attack.
So far, they haven't met severe resistance in their advance. But will their luck persist? This is what we're going to find out in our next episode. So make sure you stay with us to find out more about the extraordinary journey of the Canadians during the invasion of Sicily in BIAD Day Dodgers of Canada 2021. Thanks for watching. Till we see you again, Custos Memoria.
For when